Welcome to DuemoseGård Dialogues. Have you been looking out the window? You've been talking so much. Take a look. Look at all those birds over there. And look at we have two young calves on the grass. Isn't this fantastic? Yeah, this is the best time of year to be in Denmark.
Yeah, it is. It's amazing.
So this is a bit of a special evening tonight. I say tonight is very special because we're going to deviate from the normal format. And we have tonight two guest speakers, and they represent the two organizations that Gaia Trust has been supporting for over 20 years, over 25 years for Jen. And what we usually do with these two leaders is we invite them once a year to come to the annual meeting here at Gaia Trust, which was today. And so that's the reason why they happen to be here. And so May East, over here, she is the CEO of Gaia Education and based in Edinburgh. And Kosha Joubert is the CEO of Gen Global Ecovillage Network, also based in Scotland, by the way. So what they're going to do tonight is a bit different. They've suggested themselves that rather than making presentations, they will have a dialogue between the two of them for the first half of the evening. And I'm really not sure what they're going to talk about, but they have their own ideas. I think it has something to do with what it's like to be a woman leader or something like that. So I'm really excited to hear what you're going to talk about. And then after the 45 minutes, we'll open it for discussions so everybody can join in. So with no further ado, I'll give the word to these two lovely ladies.
Hey, thank you. So the idea for tonight was, as Ross already preempted, came from a dialogue. We were having a dialogue. Actually, Kosha was interviewing me for one of her programs. And we said, maybe next time we have the same kind of stage, we can continue this exploration. But we don't know if this is interesting for you. We know it's interesting for us, but we are here to serve you too. So basically, the idea is that we'll do like maybe 5 minutes presentation of what is alive right now in our organizations. And then we want to explore how is to lead different organizations. In my case, is an educational organization in the world. How is to be a leader, being a woman, and in international projects. You want to add?
Yeah, I think the topic we came up with is also like women or female leadership, which in itself is definitely a question or a walking question in my life, but also in a climate changing world, or we could even say in a world that is in climate emergency. So a world that is really calling to us to come fully present. How is that? That was a topic that was interesting to us. It has something to do with us. Mm-hmm. But we also thought it would be lovely to hear from you, whether there are special topics that you would love to hear about. And also, I think at least the second half of the evening will be you asking questions to us, right? So, yeah, if anybody of you has a special interest right now, you could also tell us. Yeah, we could just hear.
I would like, if you know anything about co-housing. I'm very interested in that part.
Okay, great. Anything else? Yes?
What are the greatest barriers for achieving ecological sustainability in the world?
Yeah, beautiful. Yeah?
Maybe something about how the Ecovillage movement have a changed position and role now when we are living with climate emergency. How does it change?
Oh, now they're coming. Yes.
I'd love to explore collectively what is keeping our mindset attached to something we can see with our hearts is not working.
Mm-hmm.
Why are we still attached to a mindset that we know is not going to sustain?
Mm-hmm. Maybe one more voice, and then we start, and then we do another harvest.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, okay, my name is Thor. I would like to hear your opinion on on like the state of the world. If you see if things are better today than they were like 20 years ago or 40 years ago in terms of pollution and sustainability. If you think that we are moving in the right direction or the wrong direction.
Okay.
Good.
So maybe I can.
And just if this looks strange, May has a clip-on microphone. It's not that I'm holding the microphone the whole time. She has a clip-on microphone, and I need to speak into this one.
After the 45 minutes, we can swap. Yeah. Yeah. So I would say that I've been studying, starting with your provocation, about future scenarios for many, many years. I've been very interested in future scenarios and using different parameters to project the future. And one of the parameters could be the one that Kosha proposed, which is the climate change. How are we going to be growing from what is going to be the impact in the world from 1.5 centigrades to 2 to 3 or to 4? And what's going to be the impact in the cities, in the coastal areas, in the forests, in the savannas? You know, there's so many projections by the international scientific community. And I say from all the projections, I think we can summarize in 2. And transition is going to happen. Either we are going to design it or we're going to be victims of it. And Gaia Education is in the business of designing, building capacity for people being able to design the human presence in the planet. So that's our raison d'être. That's why we are alive. And how do we do that? We do by creating learning environments where people move from 3 kind of it's a continuous movement, but with different tonalities. The first one is about experiment, and the experiment of our education comes very much to our roots because we are born out of the Ecovillage movement. So you have the experiment part, and then from the experiment you have an experience, and from the experience you have an expression. You cannot express a new lifestyle, a new mindset, if you haven't gone through these 3 stages: experiment, experience, and expression. It's a continuous, but let's say we specialize in creating learning environments where people can go through these 3. And when they start expressing, they have a system of support, a support system that can help them to be innovative and creative in their expression, in context to their locality. Now pass on to.
Yeah, beautiful. And I think at the root of this conscious design of our presence lies the motivation that runs through us as human beings. So what is it that really drives us to even be born at this time? Why are we here? And I was actually just a short move. I was very touched by the death of a friend on Easter Sunday, Polly Higgins, who was the founder of the ecocide movement. And her life's passion was to restore our trust in the justice system. And at the heart of the justice system, in all cultures, in the ancient cultures, lies the duty of care, our duty of care towards all life around us. And then over that basic law, many laws were put that have been financed mainly by corporations or people with a lot of money over the years, starting from slave trade to industrialization. So a lot of other laws that are put above and around this basic law of the duty of care. So I think, in a way, the motivation that lies behind the design is our duty of care towards the protection of all life. And I think this is the motivation that lies at the heart of the Ecovillage network, at the heart of each founder of an Ecovillage. There's this inner movement to wanting to express care, not, there's so many ways in which we can express care on this planet, but to do it also in our real life, where our feet touch the ground, where we grow our family in the fields around the house, like here. So, yeah, I'm touched by that, the duty of care. And just to come back, and then the design that comes out of that. And also somehow your question is still with me about the state of the world. And for me, because I travel a lot, and I'm also touched when I come to Europe, because here we could believe that things are better than 20, 40 years ago, Because really our environmental protection movement has already had an effect, right? There's more organic farms, there's forests that are being protected, etc. But when I travel in Latin America and Africa and Asia, the destruction is like, to me, it's just from what I see, it's faster than ever before. The trees are just coming down, And then I don't know how, because the statistics from science, I don't know how they're created always. What kind of trees are being counted as trees? Is it newly planted trees that are this high? They're counted as a tree instead of a huge 300-year-old tree that has just been cut down. But as I travel, I think when I listen to the planet at this point in time, there is nothing else to do but to wake up. Really wake up, because the world is calling to us. And from that, I think we can also come to hope again. But it's definitely, from what I see in the world, there is a lot that we need to do. Back to you. I don't know whether we even speak with questions or with a conversation.
Maybe I'll do one more round
so
that we can kind of contemplate what we have open.
Okay, yeah.
And so the wake up that you pass on to me, I'll take the wake up.
Yeah.
And I mean, which high model ground can we from the global north? And I come from the global south and from Brazil, but what is the high model ground that we have that people from the global south need to awake? So questioning this, how this awakening can take place. And I'll give you an example. We've been working in a region in India called Koraput with an association, a federation of tribal women for many, many years, building capacity, bringing permaculture, bringing different types of governance, year after year of working the land and working the social norms. And then in India, they say that the Ministry of Agriculture is the monsoon. Because if the monsoon comes earlier or later, this has a whole impact into the whole system of life. And of course, we are disrupting the monsoon cycles for some years. But this year, we had a hurricane in the region that we've been working for our colleagues over 15 years. So in one hurricane, 10 years of hard work, in 2-3 days, you go back to zero. So what is this calling us? And you say, oh, we need to awake. And my experience, like working with communities in the global south, they are those that, when you talk about climate change to them, this is like they feel in their bones, in their skin, because they haven't been those who were created the conditions for this to happen, but the first that are feeling in their life. So 15 years of regenerative development going in 3 days of hurricane, what do you do then? And I say, we need to awake. So, I mean, they are very awakened because they will wake up next day and they'll continue life because they think, in a way, the Indian anyway think that this is one of a chain of lives. But I feel uncomfortable when we say that we humans need to wake up each other. I think all that we can do is create the conditions for people to awake themselves. But I can't. With the 54 countries that Gaia Education is present, I don't think we are awakening people there. We're creating spaces for dialogue, for people to having the insights. It's like education, you know, you have the empty bucket paradigm. Education is like you come in, you awaken, you know how it is to be living in a lifestyle because that's, you know, I have sorted out and you don't know. And I come and I pour all that I know to your empty bucket. And I'm a daughter of, you know, my main teacher at university was Paulo Freire. So it's like education is not filling an empty bucket, it's igniting the fire. And igniting the fire is not awakening people, it's creating the conditions for them to have the insights and to change in their own timing. However, people are in different stages of preparedness for change. Some people say, is there a problem in the world? Oh, some say, I think there is something wrong. Some are already doing the change, and some are already critiquing the change that they have done. From our perspective of Gaia Education, that is creating the conditions for learning, we need to go where people are more than we need to go and awake people so they know how we are. So that's how we kind of work with our education. I'm not sure if it makes sense for you, but that's what emerged with 14 years of us working together. We go where people are and we create the conditions and the questions. It's much more the questions that we put than the answers that we give.
Yeah, thank you. And, you know, I guess when you know, because I think I would also like to give those of you who don't have so much background about the Global Ecovillage Network and Gaia Education also just a little bit of an insight so the Global Ecovillage Network, now we have ecovillages in more than 114 countries. We can trace our links to 6,013 communities at the moment. We know we reach out to many more, but these are the communities where we really know the contact people and the places and the networks. So it's grown into a big network over these past 25 years. And I guess that in all these places there is a constant, you know, because climate change is just one expression of so many expressions of our broken relationship to ourselves and the world around us and to each other. So I guess when I speak of awakening, it's like what I mean with that word is about, you know, how do I wake up again to the fact that each relationship I have is real, it's there. And I can bring more or less sensitivity and awareness to that relationship. So when I eat an apple, do I feel what I am eating, the history that this apple brings to my body? You know, if I if I live in a place, how am I connected to the roots? How am I connected to all the living beings around me? How are we really deeply connected to each other? Are we able again to listen to the feedback that the world around us is giving us constantly? You know, there is such a richness. And, you know, I don't think it's the problem is the mindset so much, even though, I mean, I would say we've become very used to living in the mind in this level, rather than also listening to our bodies and our emotions and our souls, you know. But, you know, are we able to really hear what the world is saying to us and finding adequate responses? And to me, both Gaia Education and the Ecovillage Network grow directly from the search for an adequate response. And they're just part of a much bigger movement of adequate responses. And more, I have the strong feeling that each person has their very own, I call it the red thread. You know, they're, as you said, like experiment and then, what did you experiment? Experience and then express. But this experiment, experience and express, like a constant learning cycle, is something where each one of us is in our own path and our own red thread. And we can feel how close we are to our true red thread, or whether there's been a distance and we need to come closer again. But in that, really listening deeply to all life around us is where I come from when I use that word. And I know that you had a question before, so. Oh, great. Perfect.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
Good.
Yeah. Yeah.
So can I ask you a question then, Kosha? So moving to what we wanted to explore, how much do you think what you do define who you are? What you do with Jen in the world define who you are as a contemporary woman?
Well, how much does who I am define what I do in Jen?
It's the other way around. How much?
No, I heard that. I'm just asking myself this way around. You know, I wonder, because for me, definitely Jen emerged in my path in such a very organic way. You know, I'm from South Africa and was born under apartheid. And my first community was a community where black and white people lived together. And that's where, in a way, my hope in the world was restored there. You know, so it was so much a part of my path, and it so much grew. I've been living in community for the past 30 years, and I now live in Findhorn in Scotland, so I still live in community. And co-housing is good. And we can say more, but it's just, and I think it's a co-defining. Like, what I find really interesting about the work and the life is, I think that eco-villages, communities, also co-housing communities, they give us a chance to try ourselves in many different roles. Yeah, often in mainstream, we end up having a job and then being in the family, but it's very limiting, you know, actually. But in a community, you know, maybe you have to be the food sourcer. At some phase, you need to be a farmer. Then you need to be a workshop facilitator or organizer. You need to be the receiver of big political delegations that are coming for a visit. You know, you need to represent your eco-village at the UN. You have all these opportunities to try out parts that you would never try out. You know, you even get roped into singing solo or doing improv theater, or, you know, expressing your most innermost intimacy in a circle where you probably didn't think you would do that, you know. There's so much happening to you. So it's a very transformative space. It has been incredibly transformative for me. But also it's a wonderful opportunity to grow. And I found it interesting that as a young mother, you know, many people go through a similar journey, you know, that as young people, I was a nomad for a while. I traveled around. I traveled to many different eco-villages and communities and countries. I became a mother. I became a farmer. I became the one who plants the carrots and harvests the carrots and cooks for people and had my babies in a circus wagon. And then I became a facilitator and a workshop provider. It started growing. I was involved in the Gen meetings when they happened close to where I was living. I was invited to the Gaia education, starting the writing of the curriculum, all of that as an Ecovillage educator. And that catapulted me also into a next bigger circle. Then I became involved in Gen. I was invited as Gen Europe president, then Gen Europe director. I started spreading my work to Africa. Then I started being involved in Gen. And now I'm here, you know, and I move in this global world. Like now my kids have left home and I get to travel the world. And I really host a lot of our eco-villages and the world in my heart. You know, so I feel in that way, I feel that I am so deeply formed by Gen. And at the same time, I guess it also still feels whenever I feel into me that Gen is still my red thread, right on my red thread, which I feel incredibly grateful for, you know. I think if we find the person we love most and get to marry them, and we find our red thread and get to be with it, those are some of the luckiest and happiest things to be grateful for. Yeah, so what would you say about...
Well, why don't you ask another question?
Yeah.
A different question.
Well, I mean, I would love to know how it has been for you as a woman to stand in leadership, also in a movement or a network that doesn't naturally love hierarchy very much. How has that been for you?
Well, I'm a daughter of a farmer and a captain. He was a farmer and a captain. Very close to a kind of flying captain, very close to the earth, but also in the sky. And so somehow I think I carried these two kind of trends inside of me. One which is I'm happy to command in a gentle way, because you can't be a leader without wanting to lead, from my perspective. If you're a leader, doesn't mean that you are over people, but it's about, you know, oh, I am a leader, but don't look at me, I'm not a leader. So either you're a leader or you're not. And a leader is the one that has trepidation, has fears, because he's ahead of the game, he's bringing something. And we know that in alpinism, the alpinists that first to die are those who don't have fear. So fear is something that is important. Trepidation is something that is important to have. But in my leadership, trepidation takes me into walking with the trepidation until I walk in the territory. It doesn't paralyze me. So trepidation is important, but moving with the trepidation, yes.
It's just, I saw this on Facebook with the wolves, where the oldest and the weakest of the wolf were in the front, and right behind them there was the youngest and the strongest wolves to defend them, and then there was a whole horde of wolves, and in the back was the leader, in the very back, together, And I just think this masculine leadership is this one going in front and making the way, but maybe the more feminine leadership is the one leading forward. Or
Yes, it's a beautiful image. Our logo and our kind of main iconic image of Gaia Education is all around geese. We call ourselves geese. Geese are those who fly information. And Hilda Jackson used to be called the mother geese, mother goose. And I was, you know, when Hilda would leave, I'll take the position. When I leave, somebody else is another way of, you know, is a roving leadership. And, but the one, whenever you're in the front, that's what I was referring. Whenever you're in the front or in the back, trepidation, I think it's an important piece of, because if you're not having this feeling, it's because you're not innovating. You're maintaining the status quo. And leadership is about bringing direction from behind and from the front, or from the side, but giving direction. So I'm not quite sure if I'm addressing your point here, Kosha. So
I'm loving it, personally. I'm loving it, yeah.
Yeah.
You speak to me and for me.
Yes. And then, but then there is also the subtle, the very subtle competition that happens particularly between women, that I think it's really important that we discuss. Because it's like, I have studied this for many, many years, you know, because I grew up in a very patriarchal society in Brazil, already part of many social movements, you know. First anti-military and then anti-nuclear, then we were feminists that at the stage was anti-man. There was always something that we were against of. And we would sit in circles, have strategies, and whenever a woman that was in that circle would have a great insight, not that that woman was more beautiful or less beautiful, but it was about the mental capacity. And that aspect of, it was like we could feel in the circle of women and men a lack of celebration of the insights and the successes of one another. And I spent many years working in me, why do I feel inadequate when particularly other women are shining? I said, what is it in me? And I could find this in my generation. I could feel that there was one day that I was the one who was great, bringing the insights, and I'll bring very enthusiastic, let's go that way. And this was like flat. There was no celebration. And I thought, maybe this is not only my inner landscape. Maybe this has happened systemically, this very subtle lack of celebration of each other's successes. And I did Jung, Freud, Lacan, psychosynthesis, many psychological processes to check what was this in me. Until it was through history that I found out that we, humanity, we created way back between Neolithic, Paleolithic and Neolithic time, we created two institutions. We created an institution called matrimony and one called patrimony. They were created at the same time. It was a time when we start fencing land and saying, this is our land. And we needed to have one wife to procreate in order to have children, to keep up, to secure that land. That was a very, very old time. It was like was not a pattern of Brazilian women in the 70s or 80s. It was something that was, this competition had long roots. From that point onwards, women, up to my grandmother, were recognized in society by their relationship to the man. Like my mother, my grandmother, they were recognized in society because either they were daughters of somebody or wife of somebody else. Up to today, if I want to buy a house, a car in Brazil, the only way for me to buy a property in Brazil, if I sign the documents called Maria Elisa Caparelli Pinheiro Gibson, which is the name of the father of my mother, the father of my father, the father of my last husband. So you have all these masculine names to legitimate that you can then buy something. So the structure is like you are legitimated by your relationship to the male figure. And since then, whoever catches the imagination of the one that gives me the sense of belonging is a threat to me. Therefore, we started really very silently competing, very silently. And I said, okay, so now I discovered, so now how I redeem this pattern. And one of the ways was through Buddhism. I found out a practice that is the other side of the coin of compassion. Compassion says, you know, when you find somebody really compassionate, you say, oh, your pain is my pain. So you have somebody suffering, a friend, and you feel for the person. The other side is like, your joy is my joy. And I must say that up to today, I need to practice mudita, because I came with the DNA of subtle competition with women. That came from my mother, my grandmother, my great-grandmother. Up to it was passed this to me, and I needed to. And I talked to my girls who are now 24, 25. So with the hope that they don't get this from me. With the hope that they will see women as sisters in a journey. Really sisters in a journey. So particularly in the leadership, you know, I saw in many, many social movements, women competing seriously. And that's something that is up to us to redeem now for the future generations.
Beautiful.
So, is this interesting for you?
Yes.
No. Okay. So, how can this be interesting to you?
I was hoping also to hear about your organizations. What kind of work are you doing? What have you been doing the last 5 years? What is in the immediate future? What is on the agenda? Things like that.
Okay. You want to go for it?
Yeah, I can share some things and maybe also come back to Camilla's question about how Jen in a climate changing world, and then you can build on that.
Okay.
Yeah, so if I guess I've been putting pretty much like a lot of my energy into Jen for the past 11 years, and it's been a really interesting journey. And I would say it's like a journey of uncovering or flowering, where still when I started, I think when Jen was started, I felt like there was a lot of conversation around it also, as if eco-villages are islands of new culture out in the green, somewhere very hidden. And I keep also being surprised when I travel to find eco-villages that we hadn't yet connected to in Jen, that were all often started in these 70s, 80s, 60s. You know, it feels like there was a special, I would say, morphogenetic field coming down around this phenomena. And they were often, like I was just in the heart of the Amazon, visiting a community that was also founded like 40 years ago, you know, it's very often. And then I think 20 years ago, you know, I watched some of the movies from the founding conference in Findhorn in 1995 when Jen was founded. And it's amazing when you listen to the language. You know, firstly, they already said a lot of the things that we say today, and we think we're very clever and have just found them. So that's a bit shocking to see. But also, a lot of the language that they used back then, which was really new, is now completely being used in the mainstream. Yeah. So it's interesting that experimental edge has really moved a long way into the mainstream. And I think the shift in Jen is that a lot of where eco-villages were often founded separate and different as an alternative to the mainstream. Today, they're much more often founded in very, very close collaboration with the mainstream, with the municipality, starting to transform the whole municipality from the outside, working hand in hand with the local mayor or even by an invitation from the mayor. And yeah, we were interested to find out, and it came out even clearer in our presentations today to the Gaia Trust board, that Jen has somehow we've kind of, and I think it's a good thing for sister organizations to do, Gaia Education has been focusing a bit more on the Sustainable Development Goals, I would say. And we focus on that. Our impact assessment for Ecovillage is directly linked to the Sustainable Development Goals. But Jen has very much been present at the UN climate change conferences. And that's where we've been reaching out to a broad public there, showcasing what we're already doing, how the work that we are doing, that is being done across eco-villages in the world, how close that is to ecosystem restoration, social restoration, cultural restoration, economic restoration of all life systems. And I think some of the most exciting things that are happening is around scaling up eco-village development at the moment, hand in hand with very close often to mainstream. So we have I could go into complexity now, but to keep it simple and to stay close with the climate change agenda, I'm very inspired at the moment by the fact that Jen is suddenly being seen. We're speaking to representatives of governments that are inviting us in and saying, look, we want to implement positive change in our countries. We actually don't know how to do this, especially supporting communities on the ground to transform into hubs of regeneration instead of often emptying wounds in the countryside together with, I don't know, sorry, but the word that comes is festering wounds in the urban areas. So you have, I don't know, it's not a very nice image. But so we're being really invited more and more by governments into collaboration. I've just come back, for instance, from Sierra Leone and the Gambia, two governments that have signed MOUs for the implementation of national eco-village development programs and are also inviting us in now to start building big projects with them and bring in the consultancy to do these processes truly in community-led, needs-based approaches. And that to me is amazing. I just had a conversation a few weeks ago with someone from the Green Climate Fund, and they channel trillions at the moment saying, look, we know that a lot of this money is coming into the hands of corruption and is ending up with governments or, on the way to where the solutions are. And we're interested in working with you on solutions. I think this is an amazing time. So in Jen, I would say we see actually an increase of interest in the work of eco-villages. We've really been branding also the name. For a while, people were saying, oh, eco-village, it's like socks with holes in them, from wool. Or it's, it's like, it became a bit like old-fashioned even, and I feel like it's become a lot sexier again, the term eco-village. And especially as we start measuring eco-village impact, it's becoming politically very interesting. And that's amazing. Places like China, we've been invited, and there's a a thriving Ecovillage network emerging in China at the moment. So there's that emerging network. Here also in Denmark, I believe there's many, many new initiatives coming up. But then also to know that this is the time where we need people who know. And this is also where Gaia Education and Gen need to work also really closely together, because we need Gen ambassadors, we need trainers, we need consultants, we need the people who have the know-how to support these kind of larger transformational processes. So it's the time where Ecovillage can become a career. And I think that's also very exciting, especially for the youth in the movement, but for all of us. Yeah, those are some responses to the organizational. And of course I could say a lot more about, but I've also got flyers on Gen, and we can speak more afterwards. Those are some responses.
How are we doing? Sorry. Oh, yes. How are we doing with the 45 minutes?
Actually, 45 minutes is just about up now.
Yeah.
But I think you're doing fine if you just continue the way you are.
Another 45.
You're doing very well. Just go ahead.
Yeah. So you also wanted to know about Gaia Education. And what could be meaningful to say is that we were born out of the Ecovillage movement, but very soon in our journey, we position ourselves in the edge. In the edge, and talking about edge, I need to invite you to imagine a forest meeting a savanna. You know, two ecosystems meeting. And when they meet, they create what we call an ecotone. Ecotone. From the Greek, ecology, tone, tension. Ecology is intention. So in this buffer zone, in the ecotone, you have species from the forest, you have species from the savanna, and you create conditions for new species, because it's a different ecosystem, it's a mix of two that don't exist here and here. So when you're designing for increasing vitality in ecological systems, one of the guidelines of permaculture is maximize edges, because edges have much more diversity, more life. So if you're going to create a pond here in the field of DuemoseGård, and you do a pond like this, you have this amount of edge between the soil and the water. But if you do your pond like that, you maximize, so you're going to create little niches for frogs and insects, so you maximize life. And if we bring the same kind of concept from the biotic living systems perspective to the societal, you can see our generation right now. I mean, we are in this phase of transition, it's very clear. And we have different roles, but we can say we have two major roles here. We have those who we can call the nurses or the nurses of a dying world, a world that we measure progress and prosperity through the speed through which you extract, produce, consume, and dump. This is very quick, and you generate GDP, and this is the measure for being, at the edge of prosperity. So that's the world that is kind of dying. The metrics, and then you have ecovillages, transition towns, permaculture. They are the midwives, the laboratories for the new things that are saying, and you have those who are in the edge. They are edge workers. They serve the old, they get inspiration to the new. So Gaia Education has never positioned itself as a traditional educational institution or a very new eco-village education. Although we were born of that, we own our roots, but we always been in the edge of the work, serving both worlds, by design, by choice. And also having some discussions with the Ecovillage movement. But you're Ecovillage movement, but you're not Ecovillage. You know, there was this kind of conversation. We always, by design, we were serving the edge because we think that as a niche organization, that's where we can serve best. So since the beginning, we got associated to UNESCO. We run some of our programs in association with Ecovillage, transition towns, and all of that, but also with universities and UN system and all of that. So that's, and in this role, I would imagine that our growing edges, being in the edges, our growing edges, is knowing that the dying world is very, very fast moving, like the language that you said, Kosha, the language that we're talking 95, the mainstream now is speaking very close. The mainstream is moving very fast to here. So what is your relevance if the dying world is moving here? So you need to recycle yourself all the time. So we always study all the time. Because for you to be relevant, for you to be able to create the learning environments for people to move to the next level, you have to be very, very attentive. Otherwise, you institutionalize yourself, the world has caught up with you. So why you're there then, you know? So this is a very important. And one of the main kind of moments for us is because our whole program is designed around design for sustainability. And it's very clear that there's nothing to sustain right now. I mean, the systems are broken. So we don't have time to sustain something that is broken. So we need to move very quickly to the next level complexity of design, which is regeneration. So how are we going to be moving design for sustainability now that everybody wants our courses? To learn how to do sustainability, what social, ecological, economic, everybody, and we are moving into regeneration, because otherwise we will lose the relevance for those that we come from. And because we're in the edge, we need to serve those who are at the edge. So we have three main publics. So we have what we call the glocalizers. And the glocalizers are us here. I mean, most of us here, I believe. Those who are aware what's happening to the planet and doing something in your locality. It can be in your local museum, in your flower shop, so you are aware, but you do here. And then you have what we call the change makers. And these are our largest public, it's growing public, are those who are mainly from affluent global north, and they realizing that the style of life that they've been having is not fun anymore, it's not more sustainable, they need to do some change, and they don't know where to start. So we're working with many of the change makers because they have this potential of change very fast. And we have also the empowered, which are the communities of the global south, that those that I mentioned to you that haven't created the conditions for change in climate, but they're the first of them hit. So how we continue being in the edge and relevant for a changing world. That's a big quest for our organization. I'll have a sip of water.
Is it enough, and is it going fast enough? Because we have a world where greenhouse gases has exceeded 415 parts per million. And in order to have a long-term livable planet, the limit is 350 ppm. So my question to you is: what do we need to do? What you are doing, is it enough, and is it going fast enough?
Should we panic, in other words? Or not?
You want to change?
No, it doesn't matter. Yeah, there's so many different ways of responding to that question, you know. Panic is not very helpful. If, you know, I think we all know, as you say, the energy of fear is an energy that we walk with and we ground it. So I think it's an energy that we might get to know more, and especially our children might get to know more. Because existential situations, I believe, are going to come more, you know. And there is, like, you know, as I said, I was just in the Gambia, and the sea levels are rising so fast now, and at the same time, the government is doing, or many individuals are also doing, large-scale sand mining, exactly in the dunes where some of the most vulnerable communities are, with the sea levels rising, and it's. You know, it's happening, yeah. And definitely, you know, how can anything that we do, that I do, that May does, that we do ever be enough? You know? So, but on the other hand, and I come back to this image of the red thread, because I found it very inspiring, actually, when I heard from somebody that the puzzle of the world is enlarged by the consciousness of every human being. And if each one of us would really follow our red thread and completely find our responsible response and would complete our piece of the puzzle, then there would not be too much for any one person to do. And somewhere in me, I believe that. I believe that to be true. And I also think that we're, as human beings, we're linked into, like, we still only use a part of our nervous systems, right? I think there's only, usually it's like 7% of the information that flows through our nervous system becomes conscious. And we can enlarge that arena. We can work with more information. And a lot of people at the moment are finding solutions that we never knew about before. Also, from that deeper connectedness to the world around us, I do believe that we will find solutions that we do not know yet. So I think there is a lot that is possible there. But
Can I just expand on my question? Because in my neighborhood in Copenhagen, we are running a local transition initiative. And recently I was in St. Petersburg. And there are so many low-hanging fruits in St. Petersburg and I guess in many Russian cities. And we are doing a lot of effort and spend money and time and work in Copenhagen. But I think maybe if we started, and you were talking about wise leadership before, if we are doing it more intelligent, then we could maybe create a bigger effort or an impact, sustainable impact in the world. Because I really think the climate crisis is not a local problem, it's a global problem. And we really need to act globally. And maybe I should move to Russia.
you have an interesting red thread. You want to add a question, or do you want to respond first?
Let's
hear from
No, I think we can.
Yeah, we can just go on.
Yeah.
Well, it's because I just saw that between Gaia Education and Jen, when you hear the voice of Greta Thunberg, the 16-year-old Swedish girl, you know that there's something more than just one girl. There's something else happening. She's an instrument of something much bigger. And so I just thought, just now, some of the young people today living in the eco-villages, and maybe who were born there, and who are now maybe teenagers, we don't hear their voices. Imagine if they could be traveling ambassadors to schools and centers of education around the world. Like, it could create role models by the hundreds. You know what I mean? Because most young people today, I think, are quite fed up with just being filled with often second-hand information. But hearing from people of your own age group, you have children who are about 20 or something like that. Okay. I just saw it suddenly. I just saw that,
Yeah.
how that could become a new youth revolution like we did in '68, right? And now something has been ignited with her voice.
Shall I comment? Then you come, look, because connects both. I think about 3 weeks ago, we may remember 3 weeks ago in history. I think there is Malcolm Gladwell talk about the tipping point, and there's the 100 monkey. There's Rupert Sheldrake with morphic field and all of that. And when we got, different countries, Macron now, and of course Britain with, Parliament and Extinction Rebellion and Greta Thunberg, and we are in that moment. We're in a great moment of transition, and I think we are in the tipping point. I have impression. Because it's like it's rolling up quicker than we imagine, And of course, it's coming from Europe first. But I think we should be very attentive because we are in a fast speed for change. And all these countries now shortening, saying, oh no, I want to compete, I want carbon, I'm going to cut not 2030, but 2025, they're starting competing, and then, and then of course you have the technologies, and then you have to have the human skills as well, And about the young people in the eco-villages, maybe you can address that. But I think we are in the tipping point, and being a drop in the ocean as well. That's what Gaia Education is. I mean, we're doing a piece of work with the migrants in Sicily for 5 years now, building capacity of migrants, and now we launch a new line of chocolate, and with migrants building their capacity in the employed youth and things like that. And these are the girls that come from Nigeria. Possibly they'll come directly to become sex workers, and we opening new opportunities. But we're working like with 20, 30 young migrants. I mean, when I look at the effort that we make, but at least I'm not like this and seeing this happening and not doing anything. So it's like a drop in the ocean. I know we are.
Yeah, and just briefly to say, one thing is just to say, as a proud mother, my son wrote his last exam this week. He just completed his master's in sustainable development in St. Andrews University, and he immediately got a job. So he started work on Friday, and he has grown up. He actually, after school, he finished school, like he managed to find his way through Scottish school and get out very early, but have enough to go to university. And then he went, he had like many of the Ecovillage kids, he had so many opportunities. I spoke about the opportunities of Ecovillage life before. So he got to go with our good friends from Biomatrix, from Findhorn, who do water cleansing systems with islands. He got to go to the Philippines and build islands to cleanse the polluted water in the canals in Manila. Then he got to go to Albert Bates, who's just published a fantastic book called Burn, just a little bit of advertisement here in the middle that you should read. But he's one of the founders of the farm in the USA, and he went to do a 3-month permaculture training with Albert Bates. And he went to travel to the Ecovillage networks in Colombia and got enrolled in doing... anyway, he became a TV star in Colombia. He had this really interesting life. And then he came out of all that and said, you know what I really want to do? I want to translate what we've been doing in Ecovillage to the broader world. That's what I want to do. So I want to study sustainable development. And now he's got a job with one of the most well-known people in the world, actually, who comes to Findhorn regularly, who we met there, who's doing, he's one of the leaders in sustainable events management, and also in ecotourism. So he's starting work with him now. And I think it's just fascinating, you know, again, the red thread, you know, this is what he's doing specifically, but also it's fascinating to watch our kids grow up. My daughter is currently in Berlin, and she moved back to Berlin, and she's there in a network in the city where all the young people from German-speaking eco-villages, I would say, in the world are conglomerating in Berlin and building these youth networks and co-housing and flats that they're living in together, but also very deep sharing. And I would say, from what I can see, they haven't solved the issues of self-worth and self-confidence, but they have solved the issues of competition between women. You know, they really have. They really have. And that's amazing. I had an experience once years ago, which was I was holding a group in Berlin. It was like a transition group. And one young woman, I found her behavior so interesting. She was quite young, and every move she made in the group was supportive to others. And I thought, where is this coming from, you know? And I actually had the thought she must come from a community, because I can't explain this. And it was true. I went to ask her, and I hadn't spoken to her. I just watched her movement in the group, only over 3 hours or something, you know? So there is definitely something that these kids receive and they take out into the world in many, many different ways. But also the youth that come to us and are so hungry. You know, often the Ecovillage youth are ready to go out. You know, they want to taste mainstream, right? But so many youth from the mainstream come to us and they're really hungry. Yeah.
We had two questions here and here. Yes.
Oh, yes.
I was wondering, when you take the thread of experiencing and then you become experienced and then you communicate. And when I meet all the people that are here and come to these meetings that we have and share, I see so many people that are extremely knowledgeable. And everybody seems to know what each other know. Or, you know, it's like a enclosed circle. And I also see that the world is extremely hungry and interested in knowing what you know. And I was just wondering, how can you see that you can speed up sharing what you know? There are so many people that would benefit from what you know. When I'm here and come here, I'm like a dry swamp, you know. I just suck in, it's like, oh, that's good to know, that's wonderful to know. And I know that there are millions and millions of people like me. And how can we speed up sharing your experience and your knowledge? And of course the children will go out there, and that is lovely. But I also think that there are more opportunities for, you know, like TED Talks or, you know, I mean, just pour it out.
She has done that already.
But just on what you're doing.
Yes. Thank you. I think the way that we capillarize more within Gaia Education is by providing what we call the learning journey, having more people coming and learning with us, and then becoming our certified trainers and taking, I mean, we have in this room here, we have many people who have been part of Gaia Education as well. So we can't claim that we can be everywhere inspiring everybody, but because we are an educational institution, we need to keep our ear very close to the ground to see what sort of education is needed right now. And the way that we can, I mean, our medicine for this convergence of crisis and this demand from people to get inspiration to continue can only serve really if we are very much in tune with what's happening. And through our people, we are we fly information like geese, no? There are many of us, and we cannot claim that one organization or two organizations can, but if you have any other opportunities for us to come and do any activations, Kosha and I were talking this afternoon, and also with the Gaia Trust board, because many times we have invitations that, you know, we're not, you know, that Tara goddess with many hands, and, you know, there's a limit of time, but we have to more and more convey in the power of the in their case the networks, in our case in our communities of learners for reaching out.
Yeah, and just to add to that, you know, I do think that technology plays a really important role, and if we can, you know, I think part of what we need to do at this time is to really help our technologies to become more embodied. And, you know, I've been practicing for many years now. I haven't mastered it, but I'm practicing really hard. Like when I write an an email, can I actually connect to the person that I'm sending it to? Zoom has been absolutely fantastic. You know, what an update to Skype, you know, and I can really feel the people, and even if there's low bandwidth, you know. But like, I often meet people after a few Zoom calls, and I really don't know, have I met you or just on Zoom? Because I felt the people, you know, so we can connect and we can feel in so many new ways. And one of the inspirations for Jen this year has been that we've hosted our first online summit, The Power of Community, Climate Change and Consciousness. So we interviewed 30 fantastic people like May, and we had over 10,000 participants. And that's definitely, so we're going to do it again next year from the 31st of January to the 10th of February. And this is really about opening our minds, our hearts, our bellies, and our spirits to what is happening in the world, and then coming together in community to find adequate response. That's what it's about. And I love it, because it does exactly what you're saying about, you know, it unleashes like the next level. But the other thing I want to say is that, you know, you see us speaking here. If you see some of our people from, and I would especially say from the Global South, who are actually in the experience, as you were sharing for Orissa, and you know, the immediacy from which they speak and the brilliancy is so illuminating. And this, you know, firing. So there are so many inspiring leaders in our networks, so many inspiring young leaders also. So also just working to create platforms for them to be able to link up. Yeah. And then there's you. All of you having been here, having listened to these inspiring talks, and then, you know, you're in your world and you all follow your red thread, and there's all these important conversations to be had, right? So I'm glad about that too.
So, we want to hear you.
My name is Thomas. I'm in movement organization 350 in Denmark. I've been
Sorry,
following
what's the name? Again?
350.
Okay, yes.
And so I was a little bit interested in you saying that it was naturally Europe being maybe some of the regions doing the transition first, and so for some perspective, it seems as if I would like to trust in that. So I would like to hear you reflect a little bit more on that. So for the European parliamentary election, well, in a few days,
Yes.
it seems as if Denmark is the country where the climate agenda is the most important for the voters. And so is there something we've done particularly well in Denmark, or do you really think that how do you see that Europe is actually doing the transition? And maybe in a way that other people would look to Europe to see how did we do it? And here obviously I think in terms of lowering our material footprint, not only climate but overall.
I think the difference here that you're talking is, I'm talking about more the intention, and you're talking about the doing it. So there is a big difference here. I think the last month or so we have seen a speed up of the intentionality of Europe. So one thing is the intention, but I never seen such a concerted movement of intentions. And some applications, we had the local elections in Britain in this last month, and the Greens, they got so many seats as never before in the history of Britain. Now that we're in this big fight of Brexit and Tories and Labour and all of that. So this is all the intention. I read Macron a few days ago. He put now a convention of people that are going to be selected randomly to advise on climate change and biodiversity and all of that. So they start, we declared climate emergency in Westminster, in Holyrood as well. And it's like, so the intentions are there. And some countries are saying 2025, 2030. So I think there is, and they are very much responding. I think that this movement of the young people, plus the Extinction Rebellion, coming together. The timing of this conference in Finhorn, I thought was an amazing timing. It's like it is coming. I think it is really emerging. It's like the immune system of the planet, of humanity, waking up and saying, oh God, we need to do something really that's getting really serious. So because the scientists have been talking, IPCC have been talking for so long, how come that now the main papers in Britain, they don't call climate change anymore. They took change out of it. They call climate crisis. They think the concept has evolved, that we need to call climate crisis. And every radio program, every politician, all the big, it's very alive. So I do hope that we are in the 100-monkey moment, in the tipping point. And of course, then it's like instrumentalize the intention. The intention is the first step. Because change to happen, there are many models of change, which we study many models. And one of them is like a new content in old bottle, which we can't afford. We don't have the time. Postponing action is not an option right now. In 1992, when we signed Agenda 21, maybe we had some leeway, but now it's not 92 anymore, it's 2018. If we have done then what the Agenda 21, which was an incredible document, very technical, very really putting, revisiting this major relationship, humanity and the planet. It was all written there, but it was a big document, was difficult to decode, and we haven't done. So now, if the parliaments and the politicians are taking this, the young people are striking, the adults are, peaceful, talking about extinction. So it is happening. I'm not sure. I think I'll say that not the doing, but the intention. And I would love to be telling more and more stories. I would see myself, an old grandmother, saying, in 2019, this was happened, and and this started to happen here. You had this young girl from Sweden, and then there was this, and then the parliament started, and then and the social movements that were already in place, and then suddenly So that's us to write a story. Yes.
Yeah, maybe if you let me just also about this, because for me it also comes back to something that I said at the beginning about traveling a lot in the global south and seeing the speed of destruction, especially through mining, but also industrial agriculture moving in, deforestation. The Amazon is currently being deforested faster than ever before. Also, because of the increase in demand for organic soya here in Europe. And, so I just invite us also to, you said, Björna, I think, about the global aspect of climate change. Climate doesn't stop at any borders. But here in Europe, I feel like we have a special responsibility, both for the colonial past that we carry, and I do not feel that Europe has yet stood up as a continent and taken that responsibility. In the UK, only last year, I think, when the Labour leader proposed that a critique of the British Empire be made a part of the curriculum of British schools, he was really put down for that. It's really hot still, yeah? And at least where a lot of the waste, where is it going? I don't know how it is right now, but I know just a few years ago, a lot of our waste actually ends up in Africa somewhere, and a lot of the beauty of restoration that we already taste here in Europe is based on destruction elsewhere, and we need to become aware of that. We need to be able, because I think a lot of us are feeling that in our bodies. We know that somewhere, but we don't spend time with it. And I think we need to urgently spend time with that also. So yes, it's great to look local, but we need to really feel how directly and intimately our locality is linked into these global realities, and that the suffering elsewhere is much more directly linked to our privilege than we would like to know. So I just want to bring that part in as well, but then also acknowledge how, not long ago I was traveling through Switzerland, very beautiful country at times, and I suddenly, my whole system just relaxed, because I had the feeling of being in a country where, and actually Switzerland is in a pretty good state ecologically at the moment, relatively. And I could feel it, I was in a country where the ecology was relatively well. And it was such a, traveling in a train and actually for over a whole time seeing that was really nourishing. So it is also, it is something that we can build here, Yeah.
Ross?
Yeah, I think our time is just about run out. So I think we should give a big hand to the two ladies.